Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Croccast podcast. I'm your host Nate, along with my co-host Matt, and
Hey.
and today we have the honor of being joined by Mrs. Marisa Tellez of the Crocodilian Research Coalition. Marisa, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going?
All good here.
Great.
So, Marisa, could you first tell us a little bit about the CRC?
Sure. So, the Crocodile Research Coalition, it was established in January 2016. And the CRC, our mission is to promote conservation of crocodiles and their habitat throughout Central America and the Caribbean through research, education, and community involvement. And obviously, crocodiles are our focal species. However, we take a more holistic approach when it comes to conservation because, that's great. We have saved the crocodiles here in Belize. We have done what is needed to increase their numbers, but the majority of their habitat, especially nesting habitat, has been lost. Their primary prey species has been lost. At that point, what was all of our effort about? So not only do we just conduct research on crocodiles, we also conduct research on crocodiles and educate communities about other wildlife within crocodilian habitat because there are so many unique and probably still unknown interactions that crocodiles have with other wildlife in their habitat. So that's why it is focused on crocodiles, but again, we take this more wide range, various other fauna, including we're going to get into iguanas now, snakes, jaguar, but also protecting their habitat because without habitat, it's going to be really difficult to protect the species.
What got you into herpetology and reptiles and crocodilians in general?
Oh man, so I blame my father. I was about 5 years old, and it was like my birthday or Christmas, and I remember, I had an older brother that wished I was a younger brother, so I was very much a tomboy from a very young age, but I still liked the My Little Ponies and the Barbie dolls, and so again, it's Christmas or my birthday, and I'm waiting to get a My Little Pony, and my dad just gives me a thin stack, and it's 3 books, and one of the books is about great white sharks. So that got me into apex predators, and through that, I started learning about snakes, and I started learning about crocodiles and alligators, and at a young age, I was about 8 years old, and I decided I wanted to be an advocate for these animals that just weren't getting the attention and love that they needed. And many of these reptiles and crocodilians, they're so important for their environment, and they have these really unique cultural ties. So if we lose these animals, technically you're kind of losing a bit of your history, a bit of your culture. So I just wanted to be a voice and an advocate for these animals. And so moving forward, I feel like it's a little cliche, but there's so many people in my generation that we got into crocodilians because of one crazy Australian dude. And I remember I was 15 years old, and everyone kind of knew me. I was the wild girl at the all-girl Catholic school and stuff that wanted to just go out in the jungle, work with animals. And someone came to my locker and was like, Marisa, there's this guy from Australia, and he's like all about like jumping on crocodiles and he's trying to get people to love crocodiles. And I didn't have cable, so I was like, all right, well, let me see if I can go to a friend's house and try to look this up. It just sounded interesting. And Steve Irwin's passion and his love for crocodiles, and just seeing how he was very passionate about getting people who are already demonizing this species or this particular animal without even interacting with them sometimes. Seeing that passion to try to get people to at least tolerate and want to coexist, that love and passion really transcended into me. And that's when I was like, you know what? Not great white sharks, not snakes. I am going to be an advocate, a researcher, an educator about crocodilians.
That's That's funny too. Cause that's what's so great about Steve Irwin. Because I was talking to a guy of an older generation, and he wasn't a fan of Steve Irwin, and mainly because he thought that when he went outside of like crocodilians, sometimes he got information wrong, which he did. And but I was telling him, I was like, yeah, but he's like his passion, and everything got so many people of our generation into reptiles and stuff, and it's been so good for the study and the hobby and everything. So
Exactly. And I mean, that's the thing is like now that I have grown in my career, I see some of these old shows of his, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would never do that. Or like, that is not the way to do crocodilian research.
yeah.
That is not how you handle and this and that. Like, but, and even then, and like even some of the crocodilian researchers in the world, they also will say, yeah, we did not agree with his methods. However, even with that disagreement, all of them will agree he did so much for crocodile conservation. He was able to pull people that wanted to kill or had no interest. He was able to pull them in and to be like, all right, they're not that bad. So he still did an amazing job, even though, like, again, people like me now who fell in love with crocodiles because of Steve Irwin, now I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't do that. But I will always acknowledge that I got into this field because of him.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of what you do obviously is conservation, but it also deals with like interactions between crocodilians and other crocodilians or other species. So kind of tell us more about that.
So here in Belize, where the CRC is based, we have two crocodile species. We have the American crocodile, which is more of your coastal and your key crocodile species. However, we have observed this species moving further inland, mixing or starting to push even further inland is the Morlet's crocodile. And the Morlet's crocodile is more of your freshwater species, your inland lakes, lagoons, rivers. You will find them along the coast ever so often, but these species are sympatric on the mainland, and there is hybridization happening. And there have been previous studies that discuss that it's a natural phenomenon. Morlet's crocodiles and American crocodiles have been hybridizing for a little over 1,000 generations. Now, one of the projects that we're looking into in collaboration with a PhD student is how has human impact possibly increased hybridization between these two species? Because one thing that we are hypothesizing right now is both of these species, similar to the 28 species around the world in about the 1950s, they all went extinct because of the fashion industry. And so, because this was right after World War II, so in case you're not familiar, it was, in the Civil War, World War I, World War II, it is known that crocodilian skin was being utilized for the military. As, very thick skin, you got the osteoderms, people were utilizing the skin for boots, and you had these particular businesses that were creating the military uniform utilizing crocodilian skin. And World War II, right, it was the war to end all wars. And it's like, oh man, what do we do now? Oh, well, let's make it into fashion. And so with the fashion industry, crocodilian skin became very lucrative. And that is where we started to see a huge decline of crocodilians around the world in the 1950s. There was, here in Belize, there's an old report from 1890s that said every body of water here in Belize was infested, that's what they would say, infested with crocodilians or with crocodiles. You could just get a flashlight or a torch at that point. It would be a sea of red eyes. However, within 10 years, 10 to 15 years, once the fashion industry became a big thing, it was hard to find one crocodile. And so going back into the hybridization, so we have the 60s, the 70s, even early 80s. You have a Morlet's crocodile, like a male Morlet's crocodile, and you have a female American crocodile. They can't find another from their same species, and their mating and their nesting season is a little bit of an overlap. So it's like, well, I can't find a female Morlet's, I can't find a male American. Well, let's just get it on. And so it's very possible, because there was such a low number of both species, because we hunted them to almost extinction, that increased the rate of hybridization. Now, both species here in Belize, they have recovered quite a bit. The American crocodile is still struggling, but now what's happening, it's not necessarily the pressure of hunting, but it's the pressure of losing habitat that is increasing hybridization. So for the American crocodile, they like to nest in sandy beaches. And of course, beaches, I mean, that's great for the tourism. That's great for all the retirees that are looking for that retirement Caribbean home. So now you have all this development on these nice sandy beaches. And again, they're just losing habitat. So now they're pushing further inland. So we have, in a sense, the past that has created an increased rate of hybridization. And now we have the present with, again, causing habitat loss that may be increasing the rate of hybridization, at least here in Belize.
So I actually have two questions off that. So the first one, is the habitat loss causing them to move more inland, or do you know why they're moving more inland?
So we hypothesize two things. One, yes, I think the primary is that they are losing habitat, so they're pushing further inland. One of the reasons why the Morlet's crocodile most likely has increased in numbers or has recovered from past exploitation more so than the American crocodile is the Morlet's crocodile lives in a habitat that maybe most people don't want to live. It's just a little too further inland. It's a little too jungly, too many mosquitoes. And Belize is right now, it is attracting a lot of Americans, Canadians, Europeans, and they want to live by the sea. So with that, again, the American crocodile, it is losing habitat. Now, something else that I thought of in the last couple months is it's possible the American crocodile is just the superior competitor. And this is the reason why. So I was assisting in conducting the first countrywide population survey of the American crocodile in Dominican Republic. The last one was in the early 1980s that was conducted. And while I was there, I was speaking to the curator of reptiles. His name's Christian. I can't remember his last name. My bad. Sorry if you're listening. If you're going to listen to this, forgot your last name. But he also assists in a lot of the paleontology digs around Dominican Republic. And they have found skulls of Rhombifer, Crocodilus rhombifer, which is known as the Cuban crocodile. Now, there's also been a skull of Rhombifer that has been found on the Bahamas. And, fast forward to even some of the discussions I'm having with some of my Cuban colleagues, because as we know, we have the Cuban and the American crocodile species in Cuba. And the Cuban crocodile is not doing so great with recovery as much as the American. But what they're starting to see, even in Cuba, is that the American crocodile is kind of taking over. It's illustrating that it is the superior competitor. Now let's look at these particular fossils of Rhombifer and these other areas that are now a little bit more dominated by the American crocodile. So is it just possible the American crocodile is the superior competitor when it is living in sympatry or with another crocodile species, and just kind of has slowly pushed other species out of extinction? And that's the thing, is like in our lifetime, I mean, we're seeing a nanosecond over a geological time scale right now. But maybe in thousands, maybe even a million years, there's not going to be no more Morlet per se in Belize. It's only going to, or what's known as Belize, depending on tectonics. But let's not get that kind of crazy. But at that point, it is, it's very possible that there may only be the American crocodile in what is known as Belize, and again, in like thousands of millions of years, because it is the superior competitor.
And what are what would be some reasons why it would be a superior competitor?
Well, you know what? It's it's so funny because up to my trip in Dominican Republic, which was just this past June, and talking with my Dominican colleagues, and then at that point talking with my Cuban colleagues, I would have thought the American crocodile was the inferior competitor because it is like compared to the morelets here, like it's so the American crocodiles are so timid. They're so shy, especially with humans. And I just when we do capture surveys, the American crocodile will like struggle for a bit and be like, okay, you got me. Whereas the Morlet's crocodiles, I mean, they are just fighting and fighting and fight. Like they'll just fight the whole time. Like you just can't even let a little bit of restraint go. Like even just like a little hairline because they'll feel that and the Morlets will keep fighting you. So, in saying that, I mean, at least when you have colonization from the early Americans, so in the Caribbean, like looking at the Caribbean, the Tainos, maybe it was because the American crocodile was so timid and shy that it was more difficult in the sense of hunting, and maybe the Cuban crocodile was a little bit more forceful, that it was easier to succumb to human hunting thousands and thousands of years ago. We also have to look at the Cuban crocodile. It is known that it had evolved to take down very large prey, possibly even giant sloth, and a lot of those animals, those older prey items, it at least went extinct in Dominican Republic. It has gone extinct in Cuba. I would think, though, the crocodiles can easily adapt to preying upon another size of prey, but maybe it's prey related. I'm not quite sure. There's just so many more questions to kind of think about it.
One thing I was thinking about when you were talking about the fashion industry and all that, I was curious what you thought on this. So I've asked a few people on this, and people have had different opinions on it. Your thoughts on, is in regards to conservation, like having, I lost my train of thought. Hang on. Having, like economy, incentivization, through conservation. So, like for instance, like with like an alligator, like there's the meat in the skin, and so you can use that of what people want to help conserve them. So like you keep 50% of a clutch, which is more that would survive in the wild, half of it like the trade, and the other half it gets people to care about it. I guess is the economic incentive. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. I mean, that's our world now, right? Everything revolves around money. And that's why there is such a push, or there has been a push in regards of the crocodilian community, particularly within the IUCN Crocodile Specialist Group. I think 20, 30 years ago, this idea of sustainable use. Because for many, even especially in the developing countries, even if there was a cultural tie, most likely that cultural tie has been lost due to colonization, that it's very hard for people to just want to protect just because. Well, we are seeing a bit of a change here in Belize where people are finding a bit more pride in protecting their crocodiles because of a cultural tie, an historic cultural tie. But in many areas, you need to put food on the table. Will we go through a more legal process of a ranching program where it's most likely not going to hinder but only improve the local population of crocodiles? And with that, it also provides an incentive to protect habitat, which is going to have this positive umbrella effect for other species in that area. Or do we take a more stern method and say, no, we're not going to do any type of ranching program, any type of economic incentive, and then you're going to have, and again, we see this more in the developing countries. That's when you see the increase of illegal hunting or poaching of a particular species, where there is none of that economic incentive. So someone is just going to go the legal route, and then you're going to see possibly a quick spiral, a downward spiral of a population. So, and every population or species is a bit different, because you do have certain, even within a culture, you might have a particular village that is looking for that economic incentive and is willing to protect the crocodiles and their habitat if they get something out of a ranching program where, they collect 50% of that nest, and that 50, those particular eggs are getting raised in some type of facility, and those people get money. But then you might, again, within a particular country, you might have another village that's like, no, we are still very connected to crocodiles or to our cultural roots, or we're just reviving our cultural roots, where if we kill that crocodile, that is killing our grandfather. When we die, we become crocodiles. And you do see that across the world. I mean, even here in Belize is a small country. It is 22,000 kilometers square, and we only have 400,000 people. And every village is like where we are, Placencia Lagoon. The idea of a ranching system, no, we don't need ranching. Let's just protect. Let's a little bit more tourism. We have a 13, 14-foot American crocodile, Charlie, that we've kind of are creating to be our Nessie of Placencia Lagoon, and there's no need. But then you go across the lagoon to another community, and they're all about the ranching system. And part of that is that you still have people that are living off the land. And you go back, and their grandfather would hunt crocodile, but it was a source of protein. It's like going out and hunting deer, going out fishing, per se, because at the end of the day, they don't have money to go to the store to buy pork, to buy cattle. So you really just have to understand the situation of, in a sense, that not even just that particular country, but just the particular areas, and see how to develop particular conservation programs, because some may be more of a conservation action plan, whereas other programs kind of going through that sustainable use may be more a little bit of a sustainable use and management program. So it's adapting and just kind of being aware of who you're interacting with.
So it's more like a case by case basis. You can't really put a broad statement on anything.
Absolutely.
What so the hybridization that's happening, are they producing viable offspring? And what are what are they like? Are they what are they like? Like, are they any different, or like?
So the hybridization, yes, it is viable babies, and if it is a pure American crocodile and a pure Moralettes crocodile, when you look at those F1s, you're like, what is that? Because it is just this hodgepodge of American and Moralettes. And so for our studies, because we were asked by government to conduct a countrywide Moralettes crocodile population survey, and then an American crocodile countrywide survey. Further inland and isolated populations, we can say, yes, those are very much Moralettes crocodiles. And then out in the Keys of Belize, we can say, oh, that is very much American crocodiles. But now mainland, we have all these morphological characteristics where we try to figure out, is this individual more Moralettes or is this individual more American? And then from there, we kind of figure out who goes in our Moralettes database and who goes into our American database. And one thing that'll be cool to see because again, we've also, when we capture these animals and we're doing these morphological assessments, we're also getting genetic samples. And we have a PhD student right now that's doing the whole genetic analysis. So we'll get to see how good our morphological analysis is or compares with the actual genetics of the individual. And we're hoping from there that we can develop a improved key in regards of how to move forward in identifying species here in Belize.
So would you say it's a good thing the hybridization isn't like inhibiting like the gene pool or anything like that?
Yeah, it is an interesting conservation question, right? Because us as humans, we have to organize and separate everything, right? That's why we have the whole taxonomic system. And like, I don't know, I just remember when I was in school, it was just the basic, kingdom, phylum, class, order, all that. And now it's like suborder and sub this and sub that. It's just because we want to compartmentalize. And in regards of here in Belize and southern Mexico, where more or less and Americans also inhabit, as well as Guatemala, it's just kind of, at first it's like, oh no, we got to make sure that the Moralettes and the Americans, like, they don't hybridize. But again, they've been doing it for over 1,000 generations. It is this natural phenomenon. And at the end of the day, maybe what we're seeing right now is the evolution of a new species through hybridization, through introgression. And it's the way of this particular animal, crocodilian, to survive, especially as a result of anthropogenic impact.
So would you say in general, looking at it from a conservation lens, whenever you see like two species hybridizing, to just let it be?
In regards to the crocodilians, like what we're seeing here, and I even talking to my Mexican colleagues, we're just let it be. Absolutely. And of course, like there is that, we may have here in Belize, we may have one pure population of Moralettes, and like they're isolated. They're surrounded by mountains and valleys, and so we're very much like, let's keep that pure per se. And then also we have the pure American crocodiles out on the further keys, but here on the mainland we're just kind of like, just let it be, just let it go.
So you mentioned you do some other research with some of the other local wildlife, see how they interact with crocodilians. What are some of the other studies you've been working on?
So the other particular charismatic species that we've been working with, it's completely different from crocodiles. It's manatee. And how that came about is, as we would be doing our crocodile research around the Placencia Lagoon, we would see manatee ever so often. And I would then send that information to my colleague, Jamal Galvis, who is known as the Manatee Man here in Belize, just for his particular records. Because, so CRC, we are the only wildlife organization and scientific organization in southern Belize that is, in a sense, that goes outside of our local area to do work. There is another group, Be Free. They are a turtle nonprofit, but their place is super awesome. They are tucked away like in the jungle, but they just kind of stay in their spot out and about, and we're interacting with various wildlife. We also do tons of wildlife rescues. So, where I'm just sending this information about manatee, and then like it just kind of, man, all the manatee are always where the crocodiles are. Like wherever there's manatee, there's crocodiles. Wherever there's crocodiles, there's manatee. And I just, we started taking out the drones, and we just kind of started seeing some interesting behavior and sharing of habitat. And so I talked to Jamal. I was like, hey, I'm going to apply for this grant to look at the population of manatee and crocodiles in the Placencia Lagoon and see if we pick up any interesting interactions. And One thing that we found out was there's no antagonistic interaction between the manatee and the crocodiles. If anything, the crocodiles are more afraid of the manatee. I mean, manatee are huge. A 9-foot manatee trumps over a 9-foot crocodile. It's huge. And so, there was one time where there was about a 9-foot manatee and it was about an 8-foot crocodile. They're just kind of resting together. They're just chilling. They're like, yo, what's up? Like, how was your day? It was just, there's just no antagonist interaction. But one thing we have noticed, like when the manatee are moving, the crocodiles kind of move away. But they both utilize, like juveniles and baby manatee, in a sense, utilize the same space, these shallow areas where it's just kind of more tucked away. And so that was something that was really, really interesting to kind of see. But this is also just an ongoing project right now.
That's really cool. So, so you're not sure exactly why so far yet that them two seem to be together?
No, that's something that we're still kind of looking into. But in regards of, I think it's just they both prefer very similar habitat. These mangrove coves that are very, very shallow. A lot of those mangrove coves is where you find a lot of fish. So that's going to attract the crocodiles because the American crocodile, 95-98% of its diet is fish. And then for the manatee, they like the shallow areas. So they have to come up to breathe an adult about every 15 to 20 minutes, if I believe I'm correct. And then for a baby, it's the longest that they should hold their breath is 5 minutes. And so having these nice shallow areas, you can kind of be like, if you need to sleep, right, it's just easy enough to be like, oh, I got to go up and breathe and just like kind of raise your head and just like, okay, take a deep breath and go back down kind of thing. So it's like these nice resting areas.
You also mentioned iguanas and jaguars.
Yes, so we are just about to start Iguana, and we're going to start this iguana project looking at green iguanas, because it is green iguanas. There is a rehabilitation center here in Belize, but there's no current records of its population. And so we do know that that the population is endangered. And so we are going to be collaborating with Joe Wazalewski, who's very well known for his work with snakes and iguanas and crocodiles. And so he's going to be collaborating with us to kind of just initiate a very basic green iguana population survey around the lagoon. And then we'll look into their mating behavior and reproductive cycle. So we're just about to get into that, which I'm really excited about. And another project I really want to start on is snakes. Someone had started to do a very basic snake study in Belize years ago, and there's just basic information, but there's not any thorough research on snakes here in Belize, and so that's another project I really, really would. I would love to support a graduate student in, or we even have long-term interns, international interns here at the CRC, and so actually it's 2 long-term interns that are going to help with the Green Iguana project. So yeah, even if we get long-term interns, I'm always very happy when they want to jump on and start a project here at the CRC. And then jaguars, it's same thing how we kind of fell into manatee. Now we're kind of falling into jaguars, and it's because the various research we do around the lagoon, we have game camera traps, and so we're just picking up jaguars, and so we're facilitating that information to Forest Department and then the key people that are conducting jaguar population surveys here in Belize.
One thing, so you may not know the answer to this, but so like you were talking about how the green iguanas they're endangered over there, and obviously important to the ecosystem there, as opposed to like here where I live in Florida, they're everywhere and everyone wants to get rid of them. Why would you say they're better there as opposed to here?
So the reason they are endangered here is because they are bamboo chicken. So especially around Easter time, people are going out and hunting, and unfortunately they like to go for the females because they like to make a stew out of their eggs, which is obviously going to impede the population. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that there's just been a lack of education in regards of, hey, maybe we shouldn't kill the females and especially get the eggs because of, you're not going to give the next generation, possibly your kids or your grandkids, that chance to eat this cultural dish. There's a way to do it sustainably. So that's actually been the main thing. And it's been interesting talking with some colleagues in Florida. They want to see if we can create a program between Florida and the Forest Department here to bring some of those iguanas from Florida and release them here. And honestly, I think, I mean, people here in Belize, if they're going to, it's an iguana, and especially because it's a cultural tie, they might be like, oh, that's great. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have, like, there's just like less of a fear that we're going to out eat our iguanas or something. But, and I know there's other countries like Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, they're also having issues with their green iguana populations being endangered. And at least in Nicaragua, they are starting iguana farming now to get the pressure off the wild populations.
Do you know of any like possible adverse effects from transplanting the ones here to there? Like, the habitats are similar, but I don't, you never know.
Real quick, in summary, all I was pretty much saying is that if we brought iguanas from Florida to, let's say, Belize, the best candidates would be babies that were just hatched, just because they're less likely to be exposed to various viruses, bacteria, and parasites in Florida. Keep them in a high quarantine facility in Florida, and then when they transfer to Belize, obviously they would also have to go through the health monitoring as well as the quarantine as well. And then it would just be a small population at first, because we just want to make sure that we're not just releasing some invasive bacteria, virus, or parasite out into Belize. And so, we would just start with a very small population, see how it works, and if it's successful, get them to start coming and rolling them in.
So, obviously, since they're not going to be taking every iguana over here and shipping it over there, but people here really don't like them, and as you mentioned, there's a lot of countries that are in need of them. So, like, way down the road, if like something happened to where they ended up taking removing most of the iguanas out of here, if that was to ever happen, since they're for the most part naturalized over here, do you think there would be any adverse effects with that?
Bringing those that they're just so accustomed to Florida and then bringing them over here.
Well, adverse effects in Florida from removing the iguanas.
Oh, adverse effects from Florida. Well, I don't think. Let's see, when did the issue really start? I felt like I only really started hearing about the iguana issue maybe within the last 5 years. Has it been more than that?
The first time I heard about it, I was a kid. I was like, I don't know, probably 10, so.
Okay. So it's been a long time. Okay, for whatever reason, I really only started taking notice maybe 5 years about the iguanas. So that is really interesting. How have they become now a part of the ecosystem in Florida? So that's something that researchers are going to have to look at. And I guess one particular thing that you can do is removing iguanas from one particular location and seeing how that affects the ecosystem. Does the environment improve? Does it decrease? Does nothing happen? And so that's something that's a great question. That's a great research project right there. But yeah, because now these animals have just become accustomed to the Florida way of life, per se.
Have you
Because if you go over to Miami in that area, they're everywhere. I mean, they're literally everywhere. Go ahead, Nate.
have you noticed in Belize, have there been any ecological negative effects from reduced iguana populations?
Unfortunately, there's just not enough studies done to kind of look at that. I know speaking to colleagues that have done some very basic research from years ago, as well as the Rehabilitation Center, the Iguana Sanctuary in northern Belize. I mean, they have said that there's certain forests that aren't growing as fast because you now don't have these seed dispersers. So I don't quite know, though, how much scientific research can actually back that up. But that is something that I do hear ever so often.
I've also heard of them talking about doing the same thing with Burmese pythons, taking the ones out of Florida and bringing them over to Asia, Southeast Asia, I think.
I've heard that too. And it was Joe Wazalewski was here in Belize helping out with some of the croc stuff that we're doing in the beginning of August. And it was fascinating to talk to him about the python issue in Florida. Because just like in my head, I'm like, how can there be that many? Like, how can you still be finding them and finding these, 10 to 15? He also mentioned like a 16-footer. And I'm like, how do people not see these large snakes? And I know like a lot of them are in these foresty areas, or let's say the Everglades and stuff. And so it's just, I knew there was an issue, but it's just to kind of hear him talk about, I mean, the issue's a lot bigger than what I thought it was. And I'm astonished how much those pythons have established themselves into the Florida environment.
Yeah, when I moved to Florida, South Florida here, August of last year, and
did I freeze now? Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry. I moved here from August of last year, and like a few weeks before I moved here, there was a story in the news of the record longest one found in Florida at 16 feet, and then a few weeks after I moved here, someone broke the record again with a 17-foot long one. And
that's insane.
Yeah, I went looking for some on this road that was supposed to be pretty good one night, and I ran into a group of guys. I was talking to them, and they were like, "Yeah, we've only been here one other time." I was like, "Did you find any?" And they're like, "Yeah, we found 5 in this road." I was like, "That's crazy."
It's so amazing to hear how these animals establish. But again, it's a perfect example of how an invasive species can affect the local ecosystem and just become the superior competitor.
Have you been having any trouble with like the Belize government or any kind of like politics or anything like that as far as conservation goes?
The Belize government has been very supportive of the research. We don't get any funding from the government. We will have officers coming out with us ever so often, so trying to train them up, because we are the primary responders in regards of crocodile issues on the mainland in Belize. And a lot of the issues, it's not the crocodiles are not the problem. It's not the bad behavior of crocodiles, it's the bad behavior of humans. Humans are habituating crocodiles, which is causing them to lose their fear. And so, there's an increase of an attack. Or sometimes there's just, with all the rainy season and sometimes the flooding, crocodiles get displaced. We do not use the words problematic or nuisance, because that subconsciously puts fear into people that yes, crocodiles are dangerous, but did that animal come to your backyard because it's waiting to eat you? No, it got lost trying to find its way to a river or to a lake, and so that's why we like to say displaced, because it's just like, oh, the crocodile is lost, right? If you're lost in a neighborhood, do people in that neighborhood call you problematic? No, of course not. And so we try to use these terms that just lessen the fear and lessen the demonizing of the animal. So with that, there have been times where government asks us, even though they're an hour away maybe, for us to drive 3 hours to go get a crocodile, out of someone's backyard or whatever. And so as much training as we do, but there's always like a new rotation of officers. So there's always continuous training. But we've gotten again, they're very supportive of us in that particular way.
So you
So is
mentioned
a large
your
chunk of your conservation?
huh?
Go ahead, Nate.
So you mentioned you're the primary first responder for crocodilian situations. What does that all entail?
So, many times that entailed us, just driving somewhere, assessing a situation. We don't react right away. There are sometimes people are living on a waterway. There's a crocodile in the creek, and it's like, that's where a crocodile lives. So, a lot of times it's education. Education is key. I think conservation would be in a better place if people sometimes took back a bit of percentage of putting their effort into research and actually educate. Because you can do all the research all you want, but if people don't understand the facts about the wildlife, if people don't understand the importance of the wildlife, they're not going to give, hopefully it's okay, I can cuss on this, but no one's going to give a shit about crocodiles. You need education is key. And so there was one particular example where this woman, she lives on the lagoon, and she was asking, there's this crocodile that keeps coming on my bank, and it's gonna walk up my stairs, and it's gonna wait for me and eat me and my dog. And I was like, I don't know what movie you saw. Maybe it was Lake Placid. I don't know. And I was like, I'm not removing that animal. And she was just like, well, and it was a good sized animal. It was about 8 feet. And I said, that animal is doing what it does. That crocodile is coming out. It's basking. My team and I, we sat with her for days. We brought beer in the evening to go over what that animal was doing and telling her, do not feed it, do not harass it. You see kids coming, you inform them. Do you want us to put a sign out there? And just talking to her. We never removed that animal. Now, neighbors call us and then tell us, hey, we saw this crocodile. They take a picture. It was doing this. We have created a community science program out of that. And so that's what so you're talking about, what we do for like as a first responder. Our first response is educate. We educate, we try to build tolerance, we try to build an interest in coexistence. Then if there truly is an issue, so for example, like if the crocodile is stuck in the backyard, we'll take it. We'll take it, but like part of taking it, we utilize the time to educate people about the animals. And one thing is so important is, especially now in this age of social media, people like to be identified, especially for doing something good. And so anytime someone informs us or helps us out with the crocodile, thank you for being a wildlife champion. You are a model for your community. You're ensuring that the wildlife continues for the next generations, and you're keeping a piece of beliefs alive because wildlife is part of our culture. And we highlight them on social media. We have highlighted people on the news and newspapers, and if anything, that gets people fired up to want to help out more. And then they're like, wait a minute, I want to be identified as a wildlife champion. At the end of the day, everyone wants to be a little bit of a leader. And so that's something that we truly try to identify. And so it's just, I always tell people, CRC, conservation is not going to last because of us. It's going to last because of the community. We are merely a catalyst for conservation. If you want to ensure that conservation lasts, it's long term, you have to get the community involved. The community needs to be educated. If they do not feel involved, if the community is not educated, your efforts are for nothing. And that is something, and that's, I think, one of the reasons, and I will, and it's because people tell me, and so I will pat the back of the CRC. We have made such a big difference in a short amount of time, especially where we are at in the Placentia Lagoon. And some people will say in Belize, but it's because we have stressed education. And I'm a scientist. I love the research. We keep doing that. But everywhere we go, we always push education.
So, in Belize, it may be different in Belize because of the cultural differences and stuff. But like here, especially in the South, people are very they know what they know, and you can tell like so many times that like I worked at the Kentucky Reptile Zoo,
I
and
know
this guy,
Southerners.
yeah. I worked at the Kentucky Reptile Zoo, and there's this guy that came in, and I was giving him a tour of the facility and everything. He was talking about how he had a copperhead in his house, and he showed me a picture of it, and it was a Midland rat snake. And I told him, I was like, well, it looks like that's a Midland rat snake. And he's like, no, it was a copperhead, and he's telling me all about it and stuff. I was like, well, we have a Midland rat snake right here, and I showed it to him, and I was like, well, you know, I was like, look, I mean, that's what it was. He's like, no, it was a copperhead and stuff. So, do you get a lot of that in Belize? And if so, how do you help educate people like that?
Oh yeah, I get that a lot. Like, no, we just have one species, or they know a lot more. And that's the thing is, um, it's having a conversation. That's one thing I always make sure that we teach. But my team's great at it, and any interns or volunteers, students that come with us. The one thing is, don't preach, just have a conversation. And so I'll let people, they're talking to me and telling me all these interesting facts and stuff, and then I'm like, okay, well, let me share like what I know, and then I provide the suggestions, I provide the suggestions, and sometimes people do take what I say, and of course there's going to be some that are very, very strong in their beliefs, but it's just, well, here's some other suggestions. I never try to tell people they're wrong, because I mean, just in general, like, right there, if something's been told to you, especially like a grandfather, right, and it's just been passed down, you saying that my grandfather's wrong is being disrespectful to my grandfather, and so that's where you have to, like, okay, I'm not being disrespectful to grandpa, but maybe this is what grandpa meant. You provide that suggestion. Your grandpa wasn't wrong, but maybe this is what he meant. And oh, okay. You know what I mean? So it is just like maybe providing that other avenue that gives them a little bit more of the truth. And so that's kind of how we work it. But it's never, and even, I mean, again, I've worked in Louisiana, I've worked in Florida, and even just here and what I've heard when I've done work in this particular region where people are like, the only good alligator, the only good crocodile is a dead one, like throw it on the barbecue and this and that and all that kind of stuff. And I never get mad. That's one thing, because a lot of people, they just want to rile you up, right? They want to just poke at you. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, okay, like, why, I just go, oh, well, that's interesting. Can you tell me why? And like, because I'm the crop conservation. I should be like, no, you can't do that. That's illegal. They don't care if it's illegal. A lot of these people, they don't care if it's illegal to cook up a crocodile, to cook up an alligator out of season, right? Don't use the legal terms. It doesn't work at first. These people just want to rile you up for some reason. So, oh, okay, well, why is that? Why? Tell me why. You get people they don't know what to say, because you're like, yeah, I know you're full of BS. Like, you're just pushing at me. So it's just, don't react like for us, I always tell them, don't react, just reply with the question, because a lot of times they just don't know what to do at that point. And they're like, oh, you're not going to get mad? It's like, no. Or like for here, what throws people off, oh no, crocodiles, like, it's really good like this. It's illegal to eat crocodile here. And I'll be like, nah, I like it more like a po' boy in Louisiana with their seasoning, and their eyes just like open up. Because I did have alligator when I was in Louisiana. And they're like, wait, but you protect them. And I'm like, but I also understand in some parts of the world, it's culturally accepted. Even though that animal is respected, it's culturally accepted to eat them. Like, it's a source of protein, and that usually just, oh, okay, you're not that bad anyways, it's just like really, it's like sometimes just catching people off guard, it just totally just mellows out like any type of conflict. And so that's something I have definitely learned.
So you mentioned, education is obviously a big part of your conservation efforts and stuff. Would you say, like, when it comes down to like the practical stuff, like would you say it's more like ensuring um, that they're not used to humans or habitat, or would you say it's kind of like a mixture? Is your main focus?
In regards of our education, there's so many misguided beliefs and false facts about animals, about crocodiles, and so it's really we're trying to really dispel them. And again, here in Belize, and I can say for the American crocodile throughout this particular region, it is timid and shy, and it wants nothing. It wants nothing to do with humans. And so, really trying to educate people that these animals are only going to act out if they feel threatened, if they feel scared. So, if you see a crocodile, admire it. This was a deity of the Maya. The Maya. So one thing. So Belize, even if you're not Mayan, there is pride in the Maya culture. It's an amazing civilization, and a lot of people don't realize crocodiles were held so high to the Maya. It's actually the first symbol of the Maya calendar, Imish. And crocodiles were not a sign of death. They were a sign of life, of fertility. There's so many cool stories about crocodiles in the Maya culture. And so we provide that to people, and they're like, oh my gosh, like really? And it's like, yeah. And that's something that we do is like, it is providing those facts so that we can build that interest in coexistence and people not fearing as much, but also building that cultural pride. Like I was speaking with a friend living in the US. It's just like, bald eagle, that might not be your favorite animal, but that is a symbol of America, the United States. People don't want to. People get mad, even if you're not a big bald eagle fan. Oh my gosh, someone hunted out a bunch of, or stole bald eagle babies. Like that's an arrow into the American pride, into your heart. And so that is something that we're trying to connect with crocodiles. If someone illegally kills a crocodile that was not doing anything, or if we see a huge decrease of crocodiles, that should hurt you. That is, someone is taking away a piece of your culture, a piece of your history. And I say history because when you start talking, to the older folks here, they'll have great stories about crocodiles. I just found one I just heard about one in a Creole village that they actually didn't kill the crocodiles there because they felt it was kind of like a werewolf, right? Like you change into a wolf, but you would change into a crocodile. So if you killed a crocodile, you were possibly murdering someone. So it's like you didn't even touch them, And it was just because these people were so tied to the water. And crocodiles are obviously in the water, and so you never knew if that was actually a crocodile or a person. It was very, very fascinating story. Again, I just learned that about this last week, and so there's all this really unique history and culture. So, we don't do that just with the crocodiles, but we try to do that with the jaguar and other animals. Like there's, you don't want your kids and your grandkids to only see these animals or understand these animals through stories because we were selfish and hunted them to extinction. A good example about that is, did you know the country animal for Korea is the tiger, but they're hunted to extinction, and the younger generation is throwing a fit. Like, how could this be the symbol? Like, how could we kill something that was the symbol of our country? And so there are some tigers now. A friend was telling me about this, that are slowly moving in, and everyone is doing everything they can to protect these animals because a lot of this younger generation is just like, who are we? Because we hunted to extinction an animal that we have so much pride for. Like, and so it is, again, just people, yes, money's a big thing, but culture's a big thing. And so if you can bring culture and make that cultural tie, that connection, people also do get an interest of wanting to protect a particular species.
how do you find the balance between? So you're talking about like sharing like some of the stories of like how it ties to their culture and everything like that. How do you balance those stories with like more of like the factual base about like the crocodilians and stuff? Because like like some cultures they'll hunt something to extinction because of like a cultural mythological story about it as well. So how do you balance that to make sure that the cultural stories stay on the positive side?
So, at least for beliefs, all the cultural connections to crocodiles, like when you look at the Maya, and now as I'm starting to build up on some Creole connections, they're actually all positive. So that's been pretty easy for us. And when you like kind of tie in the facts, so like this is actually a really cool fact. So in the Maya culture, so we have the dry season and we have the wet season, and there were some Maya villages that were a bit nomadic. And so when the rainy season comes, they might find like a seasonal pool of water, and the villagers would obviously set up there. And then as the dry season would come and that pool or pond of water is drying up, they would find, and it never really stated, but knowing the science and the facts, I could say 99%, I'm sure, they would put a 3 to 4 foot Morlet's crocodile in this pond. And they would have a warrior watch that crocodile. And he would have to watch over it 24/7. And then one day that crocodile would get out of the water and start walking through the jungle. Morlet's crocodiles are known to disperse on land up to 5 miles a day. And so and we know this. I've been sent game camera traps from jaguar researchers that were like, Marissa, a 7 foot crocodile keeps passing through the forest, and they were saying the two bodies of waters are like several miles apart. But this animal would just move through the forest, and that was a 7 foot crocodile. So 3 4 foot crocodile, and the warrior's job was to follow that crocodile to the next source of water, but also in a sense to protect it, because a 3 4 foot crocodile can be prey to a jaguar. But it's this kind of interesting cultural story that also is kind of provides some cool scientific facts with the Morlet's crocodile, given again it can be a terrestrial predator. And so that's something that we kind of tie in. So a lot of times with these cultural stories that we know, we do tie in some of the scientific facts that we know as well.
Why do Morlets do that? Travel over long distances on land?
That's a really great question. Part of it is most likely dispersing to try to find new territory. Especially with the subadults, they may be in a river where there's already too many adults, female and male, where they can't really have their own territorial space, and so they go searching for territory, for habitat. The other part is like there is some knowledge that's known that they may be going out hunting. So, but no one has really documented that. That is something that I have heard over the years from jaguar researchers as well as just from hunters, that they have seen these animals hunting in the middle of the jungle. But there's been no scientific hard evidence to back that up.
Do you think that could, if that's the case, do you think that could be because they're being outcompeted by maybe the American crocodile or another species in the water, so they have to go on land to hunt?
I mean, it could be that they, again, they're going out hunting for more food. It could just be something that's opportunistic as they're going through the jungle. There's an agouti, a gibnine, which is or a raccoon, and they just kind of go for it. Someone did send to us within the last year. It was actually really cute. You can tell it's like a 2-3 foot Morlet's crocodile. and a game camera got it as it's jumping up after a night bird, and it looks so cute because the bird was so much bigger than the crocodile. But again, this was like in the middle of the jungle, and so are they actively going because there's something evolutionary in them that they want to go after terrestrial prey, or again, is it just more opportunistic? Most would say it is just opportunistic as they're going through the jungle, but that's where someone actually has to do the research to back up that hypothesis.
Do you know if anyone's doing that?
No, not right now. There's so much research to be done. If anyone just wants to go do research, or everyone's like, I want to work with crocodiles, but I need to figure out a project. Oh my God, I have hundreds of projects people could do. And I know I'm not going to do them in my lifetime. Like I have so many students that are pursuing research questions that I have had for years, and I am totally okay not to be first author on those projects, because for me, at the end of the day, it's just I want to know. Like I don't care who does it. Again, I don't have to be like the lead. This is something I would love to know in my lifetime. So that's kind of me as a scientist. I don't need my name in the limelight all the time.
So
that's always a good mark of a scientist. It's just the main driving factor is curiosity.
So in the previous episode we just recorded, we interviewed Chris Dieter, and he mentioned that he's doing a joint project with you. Could you give us a little bit more detail about that?
Yes. Yeah, so Chris, he is the main investor for the CRC in regards of buying 25 acres here in the Placencia Lagoon so that we could set up a captive and rehabilitation facility for crocodiles here in Belize. So right now we have CRC altogether, we have 3 crocodile ambassadors, so captive crocodiles. We have one, Maester Eamon, or just known as Eamon. Eamon is blind, but Eamon actually lives, I guess you can say, at my house. He is a very shy crocodile. He is blind because someone got a machete and chopped at his head. He does not like men. He has only bonded with me. I have tried to get him to bond with other people, and he just won't. So it's pretty much me and Eamon only, and he's a very wary crocodile. And I will tell you, if crocodiles had PTSD, well, this is an animal that someone could do a study, because he definitely has PTSD from being abused that caused his blindness. He does not like men. He particularly does not like Latino men, because the area that he did come from was mainly mestizo. Additionally, there's certain work trucks. If he hears a certain work truck, I will not see him for 3 weeks, no matter what. There's just certain sounds that just spook him, and I will not see him for a while. So, and this is after 3 years of working with him. Then we have the 2 crocodiles, captive crocodiles that are on the land. That is Gilly and Sam. And Sam, let's go back to the very beginning of the podcast. Sam met Steve Irwin. Well, actually, Gilly met Steve Irwin too in 2003. But Sam was this feisty little Moralette that she kept going after Steve Irwin when he was discussing about Morlette's crocodiles and their ponds and stuff like that. And so she's actually on one of Steve Irwin's shows. It's fantastic. So she's our little starlet, as I guess you can say. So they're both at the facility, and so working with Chris, we're actually going to build up eco-tours and bring people out to our land. I would like to create some hiking trails. I want to build up the forest there, because the forest needs to be reforested, as it was once agricultural land. So I really want to help build that pine savanna up, have a nice hiking trail, as I'd mentioned, possibly even camp out there, because we do have wildlife. We do have a resident jaguar. We have various wildlife that also includes the tapir, as well as armadillo and various types of parrots. And so there's a great chance of viewing some of Belize's wonderful wildlife. And then also, of course, giving an educational tour utilizing our crocodile ambassadors.
Do you two things actually? So when I was doing a study with mice, I was actually like just reading some literature on how they can be stressed and how it could affect like the specific project that we were doing and stuff. And I'd read that mice. There was a study that suggested that mice tend to be in general just afraid of men more than women across the board. Do you find that to be the case in in crocodiles or in crocodilians in general? If they find like one gender, they're scared of more one gender than another.
You know, that's really funny that you say that because, I mean, again, I understand why Eamon does not care for men. Sam has built a bond with me that even her previous owners had mentioned. Like she's so calm with me. She's a sweet puppy dog with me. Again, if you saw that old episode, so it's when Steve Irwin came to Belize in 2003 in regards of the 20-year anniversary of the Belize Zoo. And again, you'll see her. She's feisty. She's trying to bite Steve Irwin. And then if you go on my Instagram, I'm at crocparasites13. You can scroll down and you'll see some of my training videos with Sam. Like she'll allow me to pet her head and stuff. And so she's and that's been something that's been a little bold on my part, but it's just been very interesting building this bond with this animal. And then Gilly, again, going back to male versus female, my male employee and some of my interns, they're like, he just really won't come out of the water for us. And like yesterday, I just completely pulled him out of the water with our target training session. And he does that with the other females. So it's really interesting that you say that. Now, I'm like thinking of a colleague and friend of mine, Joey Brown, who's now the general curator at the Hope Zoo. He used to work at the San Diego Zoo, and he had showed me some of his training videos, and they're responsive to him. And I've seen him train or interact with the crocodiles at the Hope Zoo, and they respond to him. But that's really interesting. I wonder how they would respond to a female. Like, I mean, they go to him. Yeah. But now I'm like, maybe I should ask him to see if he can train one of his female keepers and see how the crocs respond to that.
I always wondered if maybe it was because, and this is just a complete guess, but I always wondered if maybe like animals could somehow distinguish between genders of other species, and then since males in more cases tend to be more aggressive, that they understand that they are less likely to be hurt with a female than a male. I don't know, but the other thing is that seems to be that the crocodiles have really good memory. Do you know like anything about that? That's pretty interesting that they're able to remember stuff like that 3 years later.
Yeah, so the crocodiles are said to have the learning capability or the intelligence of a 5 to 7 year old child. So these animals are highly intelligent, and you can see their intelligence through target training sessions. So target training, it's just, or even clicker training. It's what you see in dogs. It's what you see in a lot of mammals at zoos. And I mean, now I know more zoos are doing clicker training or target training with reptiles as well. So these animals are highly intelligent. They do have memory. Pretty much my guru when it comes to target training and understanding crocodilian behavior is my good friend and colleague Flavio Morrissey. And he kind of like talking, and I know other people had been doing it, but he had started working at Gatorland, I think he said in the 1980s. And he was talking to people about training crocodiles, and everyone's like, you're ridiculous, like you're insane, like these animals don't have that type of cognitive ability. And, I'll never forget, it was in 2014 at a meeting, and he showed this video with him with alligators. I believe it was at Animal Kingdom, where they're swimming to a vet, and he trained them to swim up to the vet, turn around. Pretty much they started lifting their tail, allowed the vet to lift the tail, and the vet was able to draw blood. This was out without restraint, and that was because of training. And these animals, so obviously they had the memory, they were desensitized, and imagine the reduced stress from always having to capture an animal to do some type of physical examination. And this was just amazing. And then he had talked about training an animal in Florida, and then it got shipped to a facility in Arizona, and he hadn't seen that animal in 10 years. He went to the facility. I was like, oh yeah, I know that animal. Like, I know that crocodile. And he did one of his target cues that he had did at the old facility. That crocodile remembered.
Crazy.
So these animals have amazing memory.
And that's interesting too, because I remember seeing a documentary, and they were talking about ravens, and ravens, of course, are one of the most intelligent animals out there. And they're talking about how they did a study where they scared the babies with like this weird mask, and then they would go up to them 2 years later, and then the babies remember it, and they thought that was the coolest thing that they'd remember for 2 years. But 10 years, that's insane.
Yeah, highly intelligent animals.
So, Matt, you have any other further questions?
Nate, do you have another question?
No. Do you?
No, I think that's all my questions. No, I think that's all my questions.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great time having a conversation with you all. It was really fun. And again, I always just love sharing my experience in the world of crocodiles.